Greetings to Dr. Banlow, Dr. Kasunik, Dr. Leslie, Dr. Armitage, Dr. Friedman, and everyone else in attendance. Thank you for being a part of this historic moment. My name is Ife Ngozi Akinsheye Knox Damon, and today I will discuss my research on New York City public high school teachers' perceptions of the barriers to implementing community-based learning into the curriculum. I will begin this presentation with an introduction of the study, followed by a brief review of the literature. Then I will explain the methodology I used to conduct the research and discuss the findings and conclusions of the study. Finally, I will open the floor for questions. The problem that prompted this study is the widening skills gap faced by American employers. Automation is continuously increasing in all industries, yet high school and college graduates are entering the workforce ill-prepared due to lacking essential soft skills that artificial intelligence cannot possess. Therefore, students need to graduate from high school with these skill sets already developed. One way that students can develop academic and 21st century skills is through community-based learning. Community-based learning is an instructional approach that allows students to use academic standards as tools to learn about and develop their communities. In order to support the implementation of community-based learning, it is important to first understand the potential barriers to its implementation. As a result, the purpose of this study was to investigate teachers' perceived and experienced barriers to implementing community-based curriculum. This study sought to answer the question, what barriers prevent New York City public high school teachers from implementing community-based learning into the curriculum? Prior to beginning my study, I conducted a review of the literature and began with the history of workforce needs and skills development in America to better understand the skills gap employers currently face. During the agricultural era, skills development primarily took place at home on the farm and was adequate for agricultural workforce needs. Then, during the industrial era, schooling began to expand, which adequately prepared students for the industrial workforce needs. However, with those same traditional schooling models still in place now, high school graduates are inadequately prepared for our information era's current and future workforce needs. Therefore, American education is overdue for transformation, and the community-based learning model is a viable solution. Community-based learning is grounded in experience-based learning theories, which claim that true knowledge is developed when students apply critical thinking and decision-making to address real-life problems. Therefore, I reviewed literature on experiential learning, constructivism, the zone of proximal development, multiple intelligences, and culturally sustaining pedagogy, as these theories reflect what community-based learning is all about. For the purposes of my study, community-based learning refers to any academic activity that includes the community as a partner in the learning process. The literature on community-based learning is still very limited. However, in my review of the literature, community-based learning was found to strengthen students' academic and 21st century skills as they learned about and supported their communities. Common characteristics of community-based learning included being civically centered, relevant and engaging to students, and focused on real-world experiences. Themes concerning barriers to successfully implementing community-based learning included a lack of knowledge, a lack of time, and a lack of support. Based on the literature reviewed, I created this conceptual framework to reflect that students can graduate from high school lacking 21st century skill sets when implementation of community-based learning is prevented, and that when barriers to implementing community-based learning are removed, high school graduates can enter the workforce possessing well-developed 21st century skills. Since the purpose of my study was to explore teachers' perceptions of the barriers to implementing community-based curriculum, I decided to conduct a qualitative study to collect rich descriptive data from participants. I used a phenomenological design to understand participants' worlds from their point of view. The setting for this study was the New York City Department of Education, which is the largest district in the United States. The school district consists of over 1 million students and 75,000 teachers. Participants were recruited via an online group for teachers employed by the New York City Department of Education. The snowball approach was also used by asking study participants and others to refer New York City public high school teachers. As a result of the recruitment efforts, the study included 10 participants. Every participant was asked the same first question. However, depending upon responses, various clarifying questions were asked to understand teachers' perceptions. Oops. Sorry about that. The instrumentation used for this study consisted of researcher-created, semi-structured interview questions designed to gain knowledge of teachers' perceptions of the barriers to implementing community-based learning. Interviews were conducted using the Zoom online video conferencing platform. Prior to asking questions, participants were given general and study-specific definitions of community-based learning, as well as a rationale and examples of how it can be used in high school geometry, biology, English, and history classes. Every participant was asked the same first question. However, depending upon responses, various clarifying and subsequent questions were asked to understand teachers' perceptions. I used the Zoom platform to record and produce a transcript of each interview. For anonymity purposes, participants were labeled HST1, HST2, up to HST10 to reflect their high school teacher status and interview number. After each interview, I corrected any mistranscribed information, confirmed correctness with participants, and then printed the transcript. I conducted a thematic analysis of the transcripts to identify commonalities between the participants' rich descriptions. From the data, 88 responses were extracted, analyzed, and coded. The 88 responses led to 99 primary, secondary, and tertiary sets of themes. Support and knowledge were the primary themes to emerge from the data, with 63 and 36 responses, respectively. Lacking support and needing support were the secondary themes of support, and the types of stakeholders lacking and needing support were the tertiary themes. With 41 responses, teachers were identified as the largest group of stakeholders to have support as a barrier to implementing community-based learning. Lack of support and need for support received 31 and 10 responses, respectively. Support for administrators as a barrier to implementation received 5 responses, with 3 focused on lacking support and 2 on needing support. Support for students was mentioned 11 times, with responses focused on lacking support, with 8 responses focused on lacking support and 3 on needing support. There were also 3 responses that identified community partners lacking support as a barrier to implementation. Finally, stakeholders needing support was referenced 3 times. Lacking knowledge and needing knowledge were the secondary themes of knowledge, and the types of stakeholders lacking and needing knowledge were the tertiary themes. With 17 responses, teachers were identified as the largest group of stakeholders to have knowledge as a barrier to implementing community-based learning. Lack of knowledge and need for knowledge received 14 and 3 responses, respectively. Administrators' knowledge was identified as a barrier to implementation 6 times, with 5 responses focused on lacking knowledge and 1 on needing knowledge. Students lacking knowledge was identified as a barrier twice. Community partners' knowledge was mentioned 9 times, with 6 responses focused on them lacking knowledge and 3 on them needing knowledge. Finally, 2 responses identified other stakeholders as needing knowledge. In reflection, this study's findings directly align with the conceptual framework highlighting that inadequate support and knowledge were common barriers to the successful implementation of community-based learning. Although time was mentioned as a key theme during the review of the literature, time was not a key theme during the study. However, in the study and the literature review, having the time needed to implement community-based learning into the curriculum further emphasized the need for support. The study revealed that all stakeholders are interconnected in impacting the successful implementation of community-based learning. As a result, these research findings can help everyone gain a deeper understanding of the knowledge and support various stakeholders need from each other. Furthermore, education decision makers like the United States President, the US Secretary of Education, governors, legislators, state and local education board leaders, and superintendents can use this study to understand how support is needed to transform education throughout the United States. Everyone is directly impacted by education in American society, and the transformation of American education into a system that allows students to use academic and 21st century skills to improve their communities will directly benefit all citizens in the long run. Therefore, this study can be of value to anyone interested in students graduating from high school, prepared for life in an ever-evolving global society. In my practice as the founder of the community-based education movement, I am focused on transforming classrooms, schools, and districts into community-based education environments. I will use the findings of this study to create programs that are specifically designed to address these barriers when developing plans of action for implementation. I intend to create materials about community-based learning, collaborate with colleges and universities, and provide extensive training to schools, districts, and other stakeholders. I also recommend that others employ similar actions to support the successful implementation of community-based learning, and I plan to guide many through that process. I recommend that future researchers use this dissertation to understand the historical relationship between education and workforce needs in America, and why it is necessary to move toward a new way of teaching and learning that will prepare students for careers and life in the 21st century. Future researchers can also use this study to understand why teachers have not been able to successfully implement community-based learning into the curriculum. This research can also provide evidence of the types of support and knowledge that need to be addressed before the implementation of community-based learning can occur. Research on community-based learning is still new and very limited. Therefore, there are many ways to continue to deepen this research. For example, researchers can conduct a quantitative study on a much larger scale to measure how many teachers agree that support and knowledge are necessary for community-based learning to be successfully implemented. Future researchers can also conduct more qualitative studies in New York City and other cities, states, and countries. This study interviewed teachers with varying levels of experience. Therefore, in the future, the data collected from this study can be disaggregated by years of experience to further identify trends and perceptions. Similarly, future researchers can interview specific demographics of teachers to gain an in-depth understanding of perceptions from distinct groups. Researchers can also interview teachers based on experience with community-based learning to explore how their views may differ. In addition to exploring barriers from teachers' perspectives, it is essential to also study this phenomenon from the perspectives of other stakeholders, such as administrators, students, community partners, parents, and other education stakeholders. Finally, on a broader level, the effectiveness of community-based learning needs to be studied qualitatively and quantitatively. In conclusion, a shift in educational approaches is desperately needed to move towards solving the problem of students graduating from high school ill-prepared for 21st century careers. The literature shows that community-based learning has the potential to develop students' academic and 21st century skill sets as they support their communities. Additionally, the conceptual framework demonstrated that unless barriers are removed, successful implementation will not be able to occur. Therefore, using semi-structured interviews, my qualitative phenomenological study sought to answer the question, what barriers prevent New York City public high school teachers from implementing community-based learning into the curriculum? Interviews with 10 New York City public high school teachers resulted in 88 unique responses. From the data, support and knowledge emerged as primary themes for barriers to implementing community-based learning. The secondary themes, lack and need, included 45 tertiary themes representing various stakeholders. This study indicated that in order for community members to be included in the learning process, teachers, administrators, students, participants, and other stakeholders must receive adequate support and knowledge. Therefore, strategic planning is recommended so all stakeholders can be provided with the support and knowledge needed to effectively implement community-based learning into the curriculum. This concludes the presentation of my research on New York City public high school teachers' perceptions of the barriers to implementing community-based learning. I want to thank Dr. Banlow, my committee chair, Dr. Kasunik, and my other committee members, Dr. Leslie, Dr. Armitage, and Dr. Friedman. I would also like to thank my unofficial committee members, Dr. Smith and Dr. Knox, as well as everyone else in attendance. It is said it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a child to raise a village. I hope you all will join me in the community-based education movement as we move toward raising the child and the village. I will now open the floor for questions, comments, and suggestions. Thank you.